everybody, welcome to the Comic Era Movie Show. My name is Deshaun, and today, sorry, I'm kind of dealing with a little bit of under the weather stuff, just some allergies. Today, I am here to review Ridley Scott's Napoleon. Now, this has been a year for bio stuff. Very interesting year for biopics, biopic shows, and obviously Oppenheimer. And Ridley Scott, funny enough, Ridley Scott, the great Ridley Scott, you know, the man behind Aliens, the man behind a lot of great things, a visionary, Ridley Scott. The last biopic he did was House of Gucci, and I didn't even watch House of Gucci, but I heard nothing but straight garbage about House of Gucci. Even though I was interested from afar, you know, it had an interesting cast, I heard that whole movie was a clown show. I heard that whole movie was a mess, and it made no sense, and like it was unintentionally funny. So obviously I never checked out House of Gucci, but Ridley Scott has been, Prometheus and stuff of that nature. I think he's involved with the new Alien show that they're doing, but I think it's mostly another guy. But either way, Ridley Scott is a legend in the business. He's a legend in the business. He's a well-known man in the business. You know, he's directed and created some of the most imaginative and most visually stimulating sequences and whatnot in the history of Hollywood. So he's a man who deserves respect. So when you hear Ridley Scott and Joaquin Phoenix, who just won an Oscar for Joker, and Joaquin Phoenix is an amazing actor anyways, so you're excited for this. I'm excited for this. And Napoleon, I'm a history guy. And Napoleon is one of my favorite historical figures in history. A larger-than-life man, a brilliant man, a military genius, an emperor, an interesting guy in general. Like, his life was interesting. Napoleon was, it's very shocking that there's not more movies about Napoleon. You know, there's a couple movies about Lincoln, and, there's a couple movies about Benjamin Franklin, but there's not a lot of movies about Napoleon Bonaparte, which is just kind of sad, because, like I say, Napoleon is a very interesting character. He's probably the most famous Frenchman who ever lived. Probably. I'd go as far as say he is the most famous Frenchman who ever lived. There's so much about him that, he left his mark on history, and if you look into Napoleon, you realize that he had I've often thought in life, the bigger, you never die. I often think like Coco. Have you ever seen the movie Coco? The bigger impact you have on the world, the more people remember you. You never really die. That's kind of what's the premise in Coco. I always feel like that in real life, too. Is the bigger impact you have on the world, the more you do, the more people know your name, and you never truly die. And Napoleon did so many things throughout the history, things that we don't even know about. Certain practices, particularly in business, that we, as America, picked up from Napoleon. So, Napoleon, to me, was always such an interesting figure, always such a cool historical figure that doesn't really have a lot of movies about him. So when I see this movie coming up, and it's more of a darker, more gritty, more grimy, more of a realistic-ish approach, less fantastical, I got excited. I got really excited about it. So I'll go and see the movie on Sunday. And I gotta tell you, I enjoyed the movie. I really did enjoy the movie. Now, it's not the best film I've ever seen. They don't reinvent the biopic wheel here. And as Seth told me this, me and Seth kind of agreed on, it's really just his greatest hits. It really is. It's the greatest hits of Napoleon. It's the hits that got him to the top to be Emperor of France, Emperor basically Europe, because he had all of Europe bowing down to him. Though one of the problems with the movie is things kind of just happen. Unless you know the history of Napoleon Bonaparte and the history of his rise and fall, it just kind of feels like things are happening. I really think it could have been edited better to get across, I don't know, the flow of time better. Because, like I say, watching the movie, there is no sense of time. There is no sense of, things, like I say, there's no sense of direction. There's no sense, it's a biopic, and I understand that. But, look at Oppenheimer, for instance. And because this is a good comparison. Oppenheimer framed everything with this court case, and him retelling the stories around a specific part of his life, which was the building of the atomic bomb and shit. So there's a story, you know what I mean? There's a story, and he's telling it. So the movie is going in a direction. Like, they frame the movie, you know what I mean? The movie is framed, and it's going in that direction. You're like, okay, this is what's happening, and you can feel the build-up. You're like, well, the movie is obviously building up to be at the point that we are now. Whereas this movie, you really don't know where it's going. I'm telling you, unless you are a historical person and you know Napoleon's background and whatnot, it just kind of feels like things are happening. It kind of feels like things are just happening haphazardly. It kind of feels like he just quickly rises through the ranks. But like, a lot of it feels a little hollow because it just feels like there's meat missing on this movie to make things make. Now, granted, Napoleon lived a long life. Well, not a long life, but he did a lot of shit in his life. A lot. And they had to skip over a lot of it. His infidelity, some of the practices he implemented, and like some of the things he did for his brother. Like, there's a lot of battles that he won. A lot of the battles that he won and some that he lost. Like, they had to really skip over so much of the meat of the actual historical figure of Napoleon to get to the good shit, that it did kind of, like I said, in the end, it felt like shit was just happening. Because they cut out huge sections of things. And in the end, you're left with a movie. It feels like half of a movie. It feels like half of the shit's been cut out. Like, things just, like I said, I can't help but the feeling that it just feels like things are just happening haphazardly and it's not really going in a direction. And that part bothered me. Also, some of the stuff with him and his wife, while it's some of the best stuff in the movie, it's also some of the weirdest stuff in the movie, but I won't harp too badly on that, because Napoleon and his wife, at the time, Josephine, were notoriously a weird, dysfunctional kind of couple, which he was madly in love with her, and it was debatable if she was in love with him. But those two are great together, Napoleon and Josephine. There's all kinds of funny things, which, turns out Josephine was kind of a but I digress. Their relationship was interesting and fascinating, and it was like, it was an obsession. Like, at least the way they played it like he was obsessed with his wife. Like, in the end, I mean, eventually he ended up having, like, some of the stuff about him, it's not really spoilers because you can just look it up. So, but I'm not going to say anything, go into too many details about the movie, because in case you don't know anything about Napoleon, you could look it up and find out some of these details. But their weird, their weird, nearly kind of unhealthy relationship that he had with her, an obsession that he had with her, was fascinating to watch. It was a fascinating thing to watch throughout the course of the movie. Acted brilliantly by the two of them. It is a bit weird that everyone has a British accent except for Napoleon. It threw me off. Like, eventually I kind of just got over it. But it is something that is very odd, and you'll notice it within the first few minutes of the movie. Everyone has a British accent except for him. He has an American accent, or he's just using his regular accent. The battle sequences are badass. There are some, there's particularly a few of them. They're shot well, they're shot cool, they look cool. Napoleon, Joaquin Phoenix really gets across the confidence and the grace of Napoleon back in the day. Like I say, there's not too much to get into here. The movie is shot well. Everyone does a great job in the acting department. It looks good. The problem is it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the direction. It kind of just feels like things are just happening very sloppily and haphazard. It's just like things are just happening. There's a lot missing. It just feels like there's so much missing out of this movie. And that perhaps, maybe it would have been better to do Napoleon as like some type of HBO or some type of... Now, I saw there was an Apple film, and maybe it would have been better as a show. Like, I just couldn't help to get the feeling that this probably would have been better as a show. Because, like I said, there's just so much left. There's just so much missing. There's so much connective tissue to events. Like, that's what it feels like. It feels like there are events happening, but the connective tissue between the events aren't there. Other than the stuff with him and his wife, Josephine, which is pretty consistent. All of his political stuff, all of his battles, all of the other stuff, it's just stuff just happening with no real connective tissue to it. Because, and if you've read history, you know there actually is reasons, there's connective tissue to the things that are happening, but they just didn't have the time to get into it because this is a movie. So in the end, I would end up giving Napoleon a 7.5. I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the performances. Some of the weirder aspects with him and his wife are very odd. But overall, like I said, it didn't, like, overall, outside of the action sequences particularly the performance between Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon and I always forget her name, but another last name is Kirby as Josephine. Most of the other performances are forgettable, and in the end, you're left with a decent Napoleon biopic, but not anything special. In the end, it's still a good movie. I still would recommend seeing it, especially if you're a historic person, if you're someone who wants to just see a good little movie. I'd still recommend Napoleon. Anyways, thank you guys for joining the Content Movie Show. Please be like and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.